that was putting myself first by racing for fun, because I was shedding the pressure of being a pro athlete and instead racing with curiosity of what I can do.
Yo. Hey, man.
We're live.
Yo. Welcome to the BeRad podcast.
Yo.
Today I have soon husband Carson Magoon, also the producer of this podcast and the glue to everything that is going on these days.
Hello, Cat. Thank you for having me on.
Duh. Thanks for going to New Zealand with me last weekend.
Oh yeah, what a wild ride, huh?
I know, it was too crazy.
Yeah.
You know, when going into it, I was thinking it was so crazy it just might work, but turned out it was so crazy that it all just fell apart.
We almost succeeded though.
Yeah, we were pretty close.
We almost threaded that needle. You know what I'm saying?
I wish we had, but we learned a lot along the way, and I think maybe we wouldn't have learned that hard lesson if we'd succeeded.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so like in the last 6 months since the last time, or 4 since our October podcast after UTMB Mexico, we've moved to Hawaii because we're spending winters here.
I'm gonna just adjust this so I can see your beautiful face.
Oh, thank you.
How's that?
Works for me if it works for you.
Cool.
See, production. We've also been planning a wedding.
That we have. It's been a full-on affair.
Yeah, part-time job.
Yep. We've been planning the heck out of this wedding.
Yeah. While training for Tarawera 100. Mm-hmm. Both have work responsibilities.
Good job with that, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
You were experiencing your biggest training block ever, right?
Yeah, I was. Biggest training block ever, and I was fit. Like, I remember we were on the North Shore one morning, and you had a great surf sesh, and I got back from a run, and I was like, I feel like I did in 2017, 2018, which is, I hadn't felt like that. And that was really special.
I remember that. That was a great day because, you know, you came back from your run glowing and so psyched.
Yeah.
And I just got to surf some of the best waves ever. So that was a good day.
It was a good day, but managing that along with wedding planning, along with gearing up for the race, your surfing addiction, my growing surfing addiction. It's unsustainable, huh?
Yeah, we really try to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think you're totally right. Like we need to really pick and choose what we're going to focus on and stick to that plan.
Yeah. And I think that you just said the keyword plan. You know, we've picked and chosen what we've wanted to do, and I think we can do it all, but planning it intentionally is what we have to do. We can't spontaneously go to the North Shore anytime we want. We can sometimes, but, you know, we have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
We
and
can't.
like intentionally planning out each step.
Yeah.
Getting to the airport on time.
Yeah. If I want to race in New Zealand, I have to know exactly what the week before is going to look like months out, not the day before.
Right.
Leave.
Well, we both do, because as your like and your partner and all that, it's a lot of energy for me also. It's not just I'm not just there along for the ride. Like I'm equally like putting in as much energy as possible. So you're right. Like it's a team effort, and we need to both focus on what that plan looks like, so we can properly execute.
And I think this is a great example of how we are working as a team, but, you know, because we haven't sat down and planned our year, we've just been kind of putting duct tape over all the little things that are falling apart all the time, instead of looking ahead and seeing, or anticipating what's going to happen.
Right.
And so, you know, the lesson here is like, we just need to be intentional about how we do things. We can do it all, but we have to be intentional because we're a team, you know, and now there's 2 parts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That leads to a whole lot more complications when there's 2 moving parts rather than just one.
Yeah.
But also a lot more possibility and opportunity to utilize both of our energy. Right?
Yeah, totally. So how was this race? How is it for you?
How was it for me?
Yeah.
How was it for you? Oh my God.
Well,
that was really, that was a wild ride. Okay. For me, from my perspective, like I went into dropping you off exhausted.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how you were exhausted beginning this thing.
Yeah. I mean, you and we missed our flight because we underplanned and overworked. You know, we tried our best, you know, packed 2 days before and still didn't leave on time with the traffic. Went a day late, showed up to Rotorua at 8 p.m. the day before the race and hardly made the start just from scrambling. And all of that while planning the wedding, working, being exhausted. Both of you and I were totaled at the start, but both really positive. You know, I was so fit and so committed to starting that I just readjusted. I was like, okay, I'm not going to go out aggressive like I planned. I'm going to go out conservative and pick people off at the end.
Yeah, you started nice and slow, and I think that was key. You know, it felt like when we got to the start, we were elated because we made it there against all odds, right?
Literally against all odds.
Everything seemed to be stacking up and going wrong as we got to that start line. So the fact that we did make it there on time for you to start this race was really cool.
It was miraculous.
Yeah, it was miraculous.
Nothing short of miraculous. Everything went wrong that could have gone wrong. And we still made it to the start. And that was energy. But I was really focused on not letting it get to me. You know, I was really focused on showing up to the start no matter what. Because the race was really important to me. And it was something that I'd had on my calendar for a long time. You know, we had Tarawera in our sights for 6 months.
It was important to me also because your commitments to a race are also mine. Like, we're this team together. So it's not like I cared less. Like I was fully committed, and each part of the way it was painful for me because I was trying to like feed you all of my energy so that you could give this race everything you got.
Yeah, it's almost more painful for you, you know, because you have to give all your...
I wouldn't say that,
but... Maybe up until mile 85 it might have been, because you were worrying about me and not knowing what was going on in my head as I'm like lining up to do 100 after you and I were both totaled. Nothing more than 5 hours of sleep for like the last week.
Yeah.
But we got there.
That was challenging. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, getting you to the start, we are stoked that we made it there on time at like, you know, before 4 a.m. And you set off on this race. Mm-hmm. And how did the first part feel for you? How did the first 20 miles feel for you? Until we saw you at actually mile 17, we saw you.
Yeah, it felt good. You know, I've been working with a sports psychologist lately. And part of what we've been doing is examining what has changed in my mentality in the last 5 years since Western States. And why, you know, I realized in 2021 that I was having less fun at these races. And it's been my mission to have fun again. Racing. And so I was focused on that. I was focused on going into it, even with all the shit leading up to it, even though we barely made it and I cared a lot and I wanted it bad. I just let it all go. And I was focused on having an adventure mindset, a fun mindset. And I really kept that. I kept that promise to myself. So those first 17 miles were a blast. And I, you know, smiled into the aid station. I saw you and my dad, which was so cool to see you guys together.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
Crewing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. we had a blast getting from point A to point B and seeing you along the way. And they saw Scott and Rachel. They saw me, just totally trashed. Like, I had to go take a nap at some point in the day. And they saw me do that. They're like, oh man, Carson is exhausted. Like, Cat must be exhausted also, but she's in the middle of running 100 miles. So, but I was also gearing up to pace you for the last 50K, which I had never actually paced you for that far before.
In a race.
In a race either, yeah. Only in personal, like...
projects.
Yeah, projects that you do. And so I was really excited for that, but also kind of nervous. So that's a big distance for me.
Yeah, and a 50K is big for anyone, and pacing is hard, and it's hard to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But then after mile 17, I still remained stoked. My long existing back and hip injury started to flare up. And I kind of suspected that because it flares up after travel without getting the proper treatment, or just taking care of myself. And because we literally didn't have any time between landing and getting to the race, it took everything just to get there, every bit of energy, every bit of time. I didn't have time to focus on the normal pre-race stuff that has kept me.
Yeah. And normally, what is that stuff that you do pre-race?
It's been changing a lot. Ideally, I get to where I'm going. In a race like UTMB, I would hopefully get body work there. And I should have taken that approach with Tarawera, but with everything going on, I didn't want to travel for 2 weeks right before the wedding, but we should have. I honestly didn't want to be away from dog or Hawaii. And then I do a series of mobility every single day, and lots of rolling, like literally 45 plus minutes on the foam roller every day. And I didn't do any of that. And I have to do that every day just to stay healthy in my training, when I'm running 10, 15 miles a day.
Especially with this hip injury.
Yeah.
Which you're going to get fixed.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll talk about that. So when did you start feeling kind of tight and realize that your body wasn't feeling all that? Was there a point where you didn't feel so hot anymore? Yeah,
so I took one step, and that kind of is how it happens. Sometimes I take one bad step and it kind of goes out of whack. So that happened maybe around mile 25 or so. And the next time I saw you guys at was mile 33. I think from 17 or 23 maybe. And so it was after that, it was between 23 and 33. So it was in that 10-mile section. Yeah. And I took a bad step, and then, my hip was bad for the rest of the time. And I had to manage it. And I knew that was going to happen. I was mentally prepared for that. So I didn't panic. I was just like, okay, we're going to deal with this today. But I realized while dealing with it that it was a lot of mental energy. And to show up at every race start that I've done since 2015, and to have it get worse and worse, better in some ways, and the everyday pains worse and worse, and the being able to manage it during races, I realize how much mental energy it takes out of my racing, and how my body can't push right now the way I want it to. And I'm constantly managing pain. So I was dealing with that, which was hard, but I came to that resolution that after this race, I was going to finish and then get my hip fixed. Mm-hmm. And that revelation was really helpful. And I had that around mile 50. And then I saw you guys again at mile 53. And I think I told you that then. I was like, let's put stem cells on the registry.
Yeah, you got that. I got that text. It was really smart. And I've been telling you to get stem cells for a couple months now.
Yeah.
But, with everything that we have going on, and your race schedule and all the expectations on you as an athlete, like, it's been hard to, like, step back and really focus on healing your body.
Well, it's a cycle, you know, and you have been pushing me to this. So, and I've had this existing back and hip injury, and after CCC 2021, I found out I had a 40% posterior tear in my labrum, which, you know, with labrum tears, they're like either surgery or PT can fix it maybe, or stem cells or PRP. There's all these options, and, you know, everyone has really strong opinions, and surgery was one that I was considering. And then, you know, I raced javelina and was considering surgery again. But when I, you know, after the pandemic, you know, I had a series of bad races. And so with every bad race, there's pressure as a pro athlete to perform. So instead of being like, okay, I should fix my body with every bad race, I was like, okay, I need one good race before I can take the time off to heal it. Yeah. And then so it became a cycle because I kept racing bad because my hip, and then I kept not fixing my hip because I wanted to perform just one more time. But, you know, during this race, I've been doing more research and realized that stem cells, it's a shorter recovery and has a high success rate. So it might be a great option. I also have a lot of nerve pain. So it's a good option for that.
We're about to get married. I want you to have a long and healthy and happy life with two fully functioning hips. Yeah. Because we have to go on lots of adventures.
I know. We are addicted to adventuring, so I can't be walking around like a grandma. And even now, you make fun of me in the middle of a training block because I can't sleep on one side of my hip.
Yeah, it's kind of concerning. Like, I need you to be healthy and happy. So, you know, that intentionality aspect, we're planning that healing into our schedule now.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
And that's huge. And, you know, with the things that I thought could hold it off, and I believe it could have, like, I was still running really well, even though it was mental energy. I've been doing a lot of strength training, and PT, which has made it probably 50% better or more than it was like last winter, maybe 80% better. But that last 20% when I'm racing, and really trying to push my body to the max, it's just one thing that I'm thinking about the whole time. And so between Mexico and Tarawera and CCC 2022 in Tarawera, I've really been focusing on strength training with Chris Lee out of Boulder, Colorado. But it just wasn't enough for now. I'm going to continue working with Chris, but I'm also going to fix the hip with some stem cells. Yeah,
so I picked you up around, do you want to go back to the race and like what happened between mile 54 when we saw you next?
Totally. I, was a little discouraged for a little while, but still positive I was going to finish, high-fiving people, having a really good time, really embracing that mentality of curiosity, adventure, and fun. Even though I was frustrated and disappointed with how my body was holding up, I was committed to that. And between mile 53 and 70, with that positive attitude, I came out of that low, and people were kind of struggling in the heat and humidity. And that's a strength of mine. So I passed a ton of people. I went from like 7th to 5th there, or maybe 8th actually to 5th. And it was a stacked field, top 10 all pro runners for women. And that's awesome to see. And I was stoked. I was picking them off, and I was going to hold them. And then I picked you up at mile 70 and...
Mile 69.
Mile 69, that's right.
But yeah, then you picked me up and you were looking strong. And you had told me like, oh, my hip is bothering me a little bit, but you were still looking really strong. And I had full confidence that you were going to keep your pace, if not improve it. Each mile you were going a little bit faster. So
yeah, I was committed to improving it.
Amazed, actually.
Yeah.
To see you do that.
So between mile 69 and 85, you were telling me to eat every 30 minutes. I was taking a salt every 30 minutes. And we were running. We were not just like hiking climbs. We were running hard for, mile 69. And I was chasing, I was chasing 4th place and chasing 3rd place. My goal, I was like, I know I can catch 3rd if I just push. And I felt like that was sustainable at that point. And we passed 4th. And I wanted to make sure it was a commanding pass because we were all kind of close together.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were pushing it, at a certain point, you just were like, I'm in the zone. I just let you be in your zone. Like, all right, stay in whatever zone you're in right now. Like, play that music in your earbuds, like jam some rap, and go and pass some people. So you were doing super well. And until you started to, not look so hot. And you want to take it over?
Yeah, so my last memory, so we passed 4th, and I'm in 4th, and I'm still jamming. I'm still, chasing 3rd. I'm really trying to reel 3rd. And after looking at splits, we realized we were gaining on her quite a bit up until that mile 85. And the last thing I remember remember really clearly is going down this steep little descent. And then going up a climb after that, we just flipped on the headlamps. And going up the climb, for the first time in several hours, I was having to hike way more. And I was playing my music, and I told Carson that I started to hurt a little bit. What happened after that steep descent? Because as we talked about, like, I don't really remember that much.
Yeah. Right. So this is where, you are running down the trail and kind of just in your zone, not really communicative for about 10 minutes. But you seem like you're still going a little bit slower, but you're still going. And at a certain point, you have to like kind of keel over a little bit. Like you lean over on your knees, and I can tell you're really struggling with something. And then you tell me that you're getting lightheaded and you're seeing black spots in your vision. And that was really concerning because this is the first time you had really experienced this race.
Yeah. In a race in general.
You haven't experienced that before in a race, huh?
No. I actually experienced it a little bit around mile 53, right after I puked for the first time. But then not again until then. So I was managing it and hadn't even thought about it. And I remember all of a sudden, like, getting black spots and then getting so many of them that I couldn't see and having to put my hands on my knees for a second to try and calm it down. Yeah.
And so you did that, and I was like, okay, let's relax a little bit. Let's just stand here and wait, drink some water, can you have some electrolytes, maybe have a snack. And so you did all those things. And then we started hiking a little bit of a jog until you slowed down and basically blacked out. You basically passed out and fell over to the side. And I was luckily right behind you, so I grabbed over and caught you as you fell. And you kind of sat down, which you didn't want to do. You wanted to stay on your feet because it was hard for you to stand back up at that point at mile 85. That's like your body's under an enormous amount of stress.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting down there, we're super lightheaded still, head between your legs. You said you couldn't really see that well. And you told me you didn't really remember any of this, correct?
Yeah, I remember bits and pieces. I remember putting my hands on my knees. And I remember sitting with my hands between my legs, or my head between my legs. And then I remember, I can't remember if this is before I passed out or after. But when I started seeing black spots, you told me to put my hands over my head, which seemed to help. And so the next day I was really confused because I was like, I don't know what really happened, because I remember putting my hands over my head and that helping a lot.
Yeah, so I think we got a little bit of that blood into your head, into your brain. But when you're lightheaded, sometimes this can help, just get some of that arm blood into your general head area. But man, when you got down there and you were lightheaded, eventually you were like, okay, I think I'm good to go. I've recovered a little bit, and I helped pull you back up to your feet. We hiked a little bit, you tried to jog, and then you essentially happened again. And that was where, you didn't pass out for a long time. It's more like blacking out, where you kind of fell down to the side and then you were still conscious, but you were sitting there unable to really do anything because you had vertigo and you couldn't see what was really happening in front of you.
Yeah.
So you actually tried to get up again after that, at which point where I realized, we're going to have to hike out of here unless if we have somebody come in and rescue, which I don't think at this point you're going to pull out. I think you might be able to recover.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what's really happening to you. And so you black out again, and we're sitting on the side of the trail, and one of the other runners, who was she was a EMT, she came by and asked if we needed any help. We sort of explained what was happening, and she started asking you a series of questions. And there was two more medical professionals that also stopped, and almost everyone in New Zealand was everyone on this race was stopping by like, hey, do you guys need some help? And everyone was really friendly and kind. But after a couple of them were running, checking your pulse, checking your breathing, feeling how clammy your hands were, and you weren't exactly responsive after a certain point. We lay you down to relax and try to, bring your heart rate down a little bit.
Yeah.
At this point, I was just more concerned about your safety than anything, and I'm really happy that we didn't, you didn't try to get back up. And you did at one point say I want to get back up, and we were like, no, we need to sit for a little bit longer. And once we sat for another couple minutes and you got to lay down, then you kind of, we could all tell that you couldn't keep going because your heart rate was still up. You were starting to shiver, and we put a emergency blanket around you until we were able to send somebody to a race official to get a car to drive you out. So that whole process was maybe an hour from the first time you got lightheaded to actually having you driven out on the trail.
Yeah. The next day for me, because there's I do remember some of it. I remember being really cold. And I remember the vertigo too. But I also remember things helping, like doing the hands on your knee or the hands above head. Sorry, brain is still not working that well. And so I was like, how did that happen? How did I just get pulled off the course? And I was really sad because I felt like I'd given up. And that's the worst feeling in the world. And I've done that before, not in recent years, but I've walked off the course when I could have kept going. And there's been races where I've wanted to walk off the course when I knew I could keep going. And I'm so grateful that I did, because I finished and I knew I could finish. So I woke up wondering if it was one of those things where I was pulled off the course or I walked off the course, maybe, because I didn't really know what happened. I was like, my impression was that I walked off the course the next day because.
Yeah, because you couldn't remember everything clearly.
Yeah.
Well, you have the strongest will of anyone I've ever met, essentially, and I knew that was going to be hard for you, but no, this wasn't an option for you. Your body was shutting down, and so the race doctors told us it could have been hyponatremia, lack of sodium, but I think it might have been that coupled with a bunch of other factors like just lack of sleep, general stress levels before the race being too high. And, you know, I'm not sure that we can really point to one single thing and say that was what did it, but you were not in a physical condition where you were able to keep going.
How could you tell?
Because you tried about 4 or 5 times to keep going. Each time, the amount of time being on your feet was shorter and shorter. And each time ended in with you blacking out, which is dangerous, to say the least. And luckily, I caught you every single time. But, like, on top of that, if you did recover, like, enough to be able to keep running or walking, it would have taken a while. And it was getting dark and cold, and you were starting to shiver, even with, like, my jacket, my layer, your layers, both emergency blankets. And even if you lay there for a couple hours to try to recover, we didn't have enough, the right kind of food. We didn't have a way for you to, like, maintain, like, get that body temperature to stabilize and your heart rate to come down. Your body was just not fit to keep going.
Yeah.
Which was really scary for me. I was really worried about you. But in that moment, I wasn't freaking out. I know how much, like, how strong you are and what you can push out of sometimes. And sometimes I see you puking on the side of the road. And then, like, 2 miles later, you're, like, huffing passing people. And I'm like, I don't even understand. How do you do this? So you do have that iron will that just is next level. But this was a moment where I was actually afraid for your safety, and, you know, other people were too. So I'm really happy that we ended up getting a ride back to the race start where we got to hang out in that medical tent.
Yeah. I remember that ride out. That is the ride. I don't really remember getting in the truck or, like, everything's fuzzy, but I remember being in there and the vertigo being so bad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, when you had to transfer between a truck and a van at one point, and between the truck and the van, it was a horrendous puke fest, and it was like out of a scary movie. But yeah, I guess you puked on some lady's shoes. Everyone there just wanted you to be safe, and so we got you back in the van and we got you to the med tent. You may have puked another time between getting out of the van and into the tent, but then we basically just, the doctors in there were super helpful. You know, they taught us some things about, like, how it's maybe not always beneficial to use saline to get an IV bag right away. Mm-hmm. Because of if you have hyponatremia and your kidneys aren't necessarily processing everything, then that could make things worse.
Yeah.
So it was tricky, and you recovered over the course of, like, 3 or 4 more hours.
Yeah.
And your dad was right there.
Which was so cool.
That was powerful for you.
The whole thing, you know, I'm really grateful you and my dad were there. Obviously for the love and support, but also to tell me what happened. You know, both you and I have had concussions and have had lapses in memory. But the next day, waking up, you know, being like, I don't really understand. I was walking with my hands above my head and feeling okay. Mm-hmm. And, like, I just don't, and I was, like, a little bit, you know, I wasn't pissed, but I was, like, a little bit angry with myself for letting myself get pulled off the trail, since that was what I was thinking. I felt okay. And so I was really grateful for you and my dad to recount what had happened, because I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy that we were there too. And, you know, having that whole crew there was really, really helpful for me to just have that support and taking care of you.
Yeah. So now I've finished, you know, with basically the soreness of 100 miles and the swelling of 100 miles. We had to get on a flight that day.
Yeah, we had to beat the storm.
So we didn't miss our wedding.
Yeah, there was a Category 3 cyclone hitting Auckland.
Yeah.
The day after we flew out.
Yeah.
We were supposed to fly out.
And our flight was canceled out of there. So
our original flight, yeah.
So I basically was in the med tent, got like 3 hours of sleep, then we had to drive to the Auckland airport immediately and get on a plane, which was the worst plane ride of my life, as you can imagine.
Yeah, man. That was brutal. But we're here now.
With a new resolve. Getting the hip fixed. Kind of shedding my fear of that pressure. Every time I pin on a bib, you know, I really want to represent the brands that I run for well, you know, and myself as an athlete. I have this opportunity to race around the world as a pro athlete, and I want to do that justice. And I know in my soul that I can do more in this sport, especially in that 100-mile distance, you know.
I know you can.
I love that 100-mile distance. That, you know, when you and I were chasing people down, that's where I thrive. That I get so much fulfillment from doing that. And it's kind of psychotic, but it's also really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I want to keep doing that.
It's really cool. It's really, really beautiful.
But
and you know, like, you don't just do it for brands. I know you said this, but you do it for yourself, and you do it for everyone who loves you, and for everyone to see you thrive. Like, I love seeing you thrive, and for you to be your best self, and for you to, like, really charge after what makes you feel alive. So, you know, I need you to do that in a way that is sustainable, in a way that's healthy, and a way where you can actually win and, like, crush it. Because I know that you can. And if this 40% tear around your labrum is stopping you from being able to do that, like, it's gotten to the point where, like, there's not another option. Like, we're going to solve that issue and make you physically strong. And you told me earlier, too, that this was the first race where you did feel mentally strong also since the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I felt really mentally strong, and I felt like I was refinding that curiosity again. And, you know, part of fixing this hip is putting myself first in racing. And, you know, that in this fun racing approach, that was putting myself first by racing for fun, because I was shedding the pressure of being a pro athlete and instead racing with curiosity of what I can do, even given the most horrid circumstances, you know? Yeah. And I feel like that's when that type of stuff is dished to you, that's how you have to race, with curiosity. And in the past, that would have really affected me, but instead I showed up and still had fun. And I think another way I can put myself first is fixing this hip, regardless of, you know, what happens after, because I emotionally can't race with it again, I think. And I think you can't see me go through another training block where I'm managing it. Yeah. Where one day I'm totally fine and I'm on cloud nine, and the next day I can't walk, you know?
Oh my gosh, it's so much stress on me too. Everyone, you have no idea. But, you know, all in all, this is, like, as messed up as it was, and as, like, freaking, like, gut-wrenching the experience was in a lot of different ways, I think we learned a lot. Yeah. And that learning experience is hard-earned learning experience, but, man, is it going to take us somewhere? Yeah. And we're going to freaking utilize it.
We're going to freaking utilize it. And I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to race around the world, and to have amazing sponsors with gear that, you know, that I love, and relationships that I love. And, you know, I've really been valuing the brand relationships so much more. And by that, I mean, like, I'm not just signing on the dotted line. It's not quid pro quo. I'm directly working with the people in the brand and asking them, like, hey, how can I be better? And they're receptive when I'm like, this is how you can be better. And that is a relationship, not just a sponsorship. And we're fixing the hip.
Fixing the hip.
Yeah.
Fixing the hip, maybe buying a house if it's the right house. And we're getting married.
And we're getting married
this week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Soon husband, no more. Time to step into that role.
Yeah. Your new husband isn't allowing you to race until you get your hip fixed.
Whip. Fair enough.
Cheers, baby.
Cheers.
Let's go get married.
Let's go get married. I love you.
I love you. Thanks for everything in this crazy adventure.
Yeah, right back at ya. Woohoo! Cat and Carson out.
Cheers.